Choices always were a problem for you. What you need is someone strong to guide you. Deaf and blind and dumb and born to follow. What you need is someone strong to guide you like me.
This is another episode of Full Disclosure brought to you by InfinityExist.com. I'm Knox, this is Patch, and today we're going to be doing cross-site scripting shell and tunnel. This basically allows you to open a backdoor between you and the victim's browser. It's a little bit different than your standard cross-site scripting because it opens up a connection between you and that victim. This allows you to run several different attacks.
Some of the key features to the cross-site scripting shell is that it puts the victim to basically a virtual environment by using the iframe. And so even if they click on different links or links out of the page, you'll still have the victim will still be infected. So you'll be able to continue to send it to commands and control the browser. And also the tunnel allows you to bypass like authentication and IP restrictions. So let's get into it.
Alright, you can easily find the source code for this shell online. We're just going to do a quick Google search, and the first link here is going to allow us to download the source code. Just going to download it here and unpack it. Alright, so now that we have it downloaded here, you can see that it has both the tunnel and the shell. And this shell is actually written in ASP, and the backend or the database for it is written in MS Access. So it's pretty easy to use and install. Alright, so what we're going to need to do now that we have the cross-site scripting shell, we're going to need to find somewhere we can host it. It needs to support ASP. So we use 7host. It's a good free hosting company that actually allows ASP. As you can see, we already have an account set up. Right, so now that we have our host all set up, we're going to need to configure the files a little bit. If we open up the cross-site scripting shell.asp and go down to the server configuration, the first one that you have to change is going to be the location of your server. So if you just copy and paste in the URL to the location of your server, that's all you have to do. Now also you want to take note of the other configurations below that. This is just if you change the other dependent files that the server runs off of. So if you change the names of the files, you got to change them here as well. Also, something else to note is that you can see here that we're using Notepad++ to do all of our editing. It's just a really easy, simple text editor with a few key features, but it's not Dreamweaver. Dreamweaver will just mess everything up, so we recommend not using that to edit any of the files. Alright, next we're going to have to change the database file. Just go into the admin directory and go down to the db.asp. This is where we're going to have to put in the path of our database. This is a little bit trickier to find than just pasting in the URL. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to write a small script that we're going to upload to the site that will give us the path of our database. As you can see, the command is really simple. It's just respond.write server.mappath, and then the path is the current directory. And this will output the location of that database. So we're just going to save it as whatever.asp, and then we're going to upload it to the site. We also recommend using an FTP client. This one right here we're using Flash FXP. There's tons of them out there free. It just helps maintain a good connection with the server. Just log in with our credentials, and then we're going to go ahead and upload that blah.asp just so we can find out the location of that database. We'll just go ahead to our web browser and type in that blah.asp, and as you can see, it'll output the location of our database. We're just going to go ahead and copy that and paste it into the database configuration. But be sure to leave the directory and location of that shell, the Xss database. Alright, now that we have that all configured, we're going to go ahead and remove that blah.asp, and we're going to upload everything to the site. Alright, now that we have everything uploaded there, all you have to do is type admin after your URL, and it'll take you to your login screen, where you can go ahead and log in. Now, by default, the login password is woot. You can change that in your database.asp, where we place the location of our database. Now that we've logged in, you can see that it's all up and running, and that's pretty much it for the installation of the cross-site scripting shell, and Patch is going to take over and show you how to use it.
Alright, before we get started here, we want to test to make sure everything's working properly with the cross-site scripting shell. The shell comes with a sample victim, so you just can test it. If you go to it in your browser and look at the source, you'll see a piece of script that basically injects the cross-site scripting shell, which allows you to take over the victim's browser. In a normal attack, the attacker would inject this piece of script using a cross-site scripting vulnerability. And as you can see there, it's not configured properly because it doesn't have the right location of the cross-site scripting shell. So all we need to do is change that to our URL. Just open up the default.asp in the sample_victim folder and scroll down and just paste in your website's URL and just save it and upload it. Alright, we'll just refresh the page and go back to the admin console. You'll see our browser show up under the victims table. And if you close the infected page, that you'll see our browser drop out of the victims table dynamically. The victims table will dynamically update itself as new victims come in. And it seems like everything's working properly, so we can start the attack. The cross-site scripting shell works by setting up a cross-site scripting channel, which is basically an AJAX application that can obtain commands and send back responses. For an attacker to enable this cross-site scripting shell, he or she needs to inject the cross-site scripting shell's JavaScript reference, which I showed you before, which was basically that script which had the source pointing to the cross-site scripting shell.asp. And you do this with a cross-site scripting attack. It can either be a persistent one or a non-persistent one. And if you need more information on cross-site scripting attacks, I suggest watching our 13th episode. And when a victim views the page that's infected, the attacker will gain control of the victim's browser and will be able to send commands to the victim. And as you can see here in this picture, there's 3 parts to the cross-site scripting shell. There's a server-side part that coordinates the cross-site scripting shell between the attacker and the victim. The second part is the client side written in JavaScript, which is loaded into the victim's browser and is responsible for receiving and processing the commands. And the final part is the cross-site scripting administrator console that we showed you before, which will allow the attacker to send commands to the cross-site scripting server, which is in turn sent to the victim. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is find a cross-site scripting vulnerability on a web page that we want to attack. If you remember back in episode 13, we found a non-persistent cross-site scripting attack in the form search function. We'll just use that vulnerability for our cross-site scripting shell. And we're just going to log in here as the user attacker, which is just a basic user on this web page. It has no privileges at all. And the cross-site scripting flaw exists in the username variable, and basically special characters aren't filtered out, and this allows you to inject JavaScript code. And for more information on this attack, like I said before, watch episode 13. So basically, we're going to do the single quote, and then we're going to take that script that we saw in the sample victim, basically the script that injects the cross-site scripting JavaScript, and we're just going to copy that, and that's what we want to inject into the page. And this will basically load in the shell and all the JavaScript into the victim's browser and allow the attacker to send commands to the victim. Since PHP automatically has // on, we can't use the quotes in the source variable. So we're going to find some way to inject this code without using quotes. And one way of doing this is to take the code we want to inject, the script, source equals to our cross-site scripting shell, whatever, and convert it into ASCII code. And we're just going to use a simple JavaScript ASCII converter, automatically convert it for us, because you can do it by hand, but it'd take forever. You probably find a couple online. I just found this one real quick. The only bad thing is it puts spaces in between each ASCII code, and Firefox will complain about that. So I'm just going to open up Notepad++ and do a find replace on it and just take it out real quick. Alright, I'm going to use the JavaScript function string.fromCharacterCode to take those numbers and convert it back into ASCII characters. And then I'm going to use the JavaScript function document.write to take that code and write it onto the page. And this will allow us to inject this script without using quotes. There's probably several other ways to do this. This is the only way I could think of on the spot. And we'll just test it here to make sure it works. And as you'll notice, the way that the cross-site scripting shell works is it puts the victim into an iframe, and to do this it has to reload the page, which can cause some problems with your attack, especially if you're on like a form or something where there's only one page, because what it'll do, instead of reloading the search page, it'll reload the forms page, like the normal page. Because it all uses the same PHP file, it'll just take you back to the main form page, which is could cause some problems if you're trying to attack someone that knows a little bit about, hacking. But I would imagine most people that you do this attack on probably wouldn't even notice or know what's going on. And if you go back to the admin console, you'll see that our browser did show up as one of the victims, so it is working properly. And if you notice down in the status bar, which could also give away that you're doing an attack, is it's constantly sending data to our attacker's website, which it's pretty much a dead giveaway that something's going on. But like I said before, there's dumb people out there. So, and if you notice, like I said before, it kind of creates that virtual environment in the iframe. So if you click on links in the website or outside the website, you'll still stay in that iframe and still keep the victim's browser infected, allowing the attacker to continuously send commands. And as you'll notice, as I click on different links, the browser's URL stays the same, even if I go to a website outside of infinityxs.com. The only way to uninfect the browser is to manually change the URL or go back or whatever. Okay. And now we're ready to launch this attack. Basically, I'm just going to do what I did before in our last episode on cross-site scripting. I'm going to make a forum post saying that I found some kind of flaw, and I'll just paste the URL to our non-persistent cross-site scripting attack right in the message, right in the post. But if you look at the link, it's pretty obvious that something's going on. So we're just going to use the ASCII hex converter that we used in episode 13 again, and we're just going to convert it to into hex, so it makes it a little bit harder to see something's going on. And as you can see, our URL is pretty large. A persistent cross-site scripting attack would be ideal for the cross-site scripting tunnel, but that's not really realistic to find because nowadays persistent cross-site scripting attacks are very rare. So it's more realistic. That's why I'm doing the non-persistent cross-site scripting attack, because it's more common. And I'm just going to click on the link again just to test it one more time, just to make sure it's working. And as you can see, it is. So all we need to do is wait until an admin clicks the link. Alright, we're just going to switch to the victim computer right now. And I'm going to log in as Patchy, and I think it's this, which is an admin. And I'm just going to go to the forums and click on this very convincing link posted by attacker. And if we switch back to the attacker computer, you'll see that Apache's browser pop up under the victims table. And now we'll be able to issue different commands to that victim's browser. Also, if you put your cursor over the victim, some information about that victim will pop up. Basically the browser and what version of the browser they're using. And we're just going to click on different commands. Get cookies to get the victim's cookies, and you can get the current page's HTML code. Then all you do is click on that HTML link, and it will show up in the viewer window. If you scroll down, you'll see that. Except the current page that the victim's on is encoded, so they're not going to get much information out of it. If it's not, then you'll be able to see the HTML code included. And also we can make an alert message box pop up on the victim. You just type in what you want to say down that box below and click on the alert command. And if we switch over to the victim, you'll see our message popped up. The interesting thing about that is if you have a whole bunch of people infected by your cross-site scripting shell, when you issue that alert command, it'll be alerted to all of them. And there's a few other commands here. You got the eval command, which will basically execute any JavaScript on the victim's computer. You can prompt a question. If the browser is supported, you can get keylogger information, mouse information. If the victim has a Internet Explorer browser, you can get the current clipboard content. Let's click on that right here, and you'll see that because the victim's using Firefox, it's not supported. And you get the visited links, internal IP. You retrieve the current page with the victim's credentials. So if they're in like a logged in page, you can skip that. But like I said before, it's encoded, so we're not going to get much out of that. And there's the denial of service attack that you can do, where you can use the crash command to try to crash the victim's computer. And you also can get the current URL. And as you can see, it shows that really long URL that we put in before. And that's pretty much it for the admin console. Next we're going to show you the cross-site scripting tunnel, which is much more useful.
Now that we have the cross-site scripting shell set up and we have a victim who has fallen for the attack, we can take advantage of the other tool that came with the download. It's the cross-site scripting tunnel. Basically this works by routing the HTTP traffic through the cross-site scripting channel. This allows the attacker to channel that traffic and take advantage of the victim's credentials.
Alright, basically the cross-site scripting tunnel is a standard HTTP proxy that sits on the attacker's system. And how it works is it'll connect to the cross-site scripting shell and obtain like the current victim, and the attacker will have to configure his or her browser to use the cross-site scripting tunnel as a proxy. What the tunnel will do is convert the HTTP requests into something the shell can understand and process, and then it's sent to the victim's browser. And basically the JavaScript sitting on the victim's browser will take this command and process the request, the attacker's request, and then send back the response. And we'll just show you that in action real quick here. First you need to configure your tunnel to connect to your website. And just copy the link in here and just test it. The default password, like we said before, is woot. And if you change the password, you're going to change it here. And as you can see, you can set up the proxy, what interface it listens on. We're just going to leave it on any interface. And as you can see, it's set up on port 8080. And let's go over the dashboard here and start the tunnel. And it'll connect to the shell and get back the current victim. And as you can see there, the ID of the current victim is the only victim. And basically all we need to do now is set up our browser to use the tunnel as a proxy. And to do this in Firefox, just go to Tools, Options, Advanced, in the Network tab. And then go to Manual Proxy Configuration, put in 127.0.0.1, and then port 8080. And then remove the part for no proxy. It's set up by default to not use proxies on the local host. Just delete that out and push OK. But I found with Firefox version 3, it has a encoding error, as you'll see here shortly. See, an encoding error comes up. I've short search on Google to see what's causing this problem. It seems just to be a problem with Firefox version 3. It'll probably work in the earlier versions, and they'll probably have it fixed soon, so I don't know. But for now, we'll just use Internet Explorer. And you configure it basically in the same way. Go to Tools, Internet Options, Connections tab, LAN Settings, and then check to use a proxy server. And then just put in the localhost again, 8080, and make sure that bypass proxy is unchecked. And then we'll just go to the InfinityXist website. And if you look at the tunnel, you'll see that it is sending requests to the client and getting responses back. And you'll notice that it says cache responses. Basically, it'll cache like images, style sheets, and stuff like that, just to save time on your next request. And what we'll do here is just switch back to the victim. And as you can see, the victim can click on different links and do different things. As long as it doesn't close the page, it will still continuously send the commands and get the responses back with no problem. And as you can see, it'll take a little while to load, but eventually the website will load. And if you look, you'll see that I'm no longer logged in as attacker, a normal member. You'll see that I'm logged in as Apache, an administrator. So the tunnel allowed me to tunnel through the victim and use their credentials, bypassing IP restrictions and authentication. So now I'll be able to do anything to the website that admin can. I can go to the admin console and just change anything. So that's basically how the cross-site scripting tunnel works.
Well, that is it for this episode on the cross-site scripting shell and tunnel. I also do want to mention that we're still taking user submissions for videos for our Underground series. You can email your video ideas to underground@infinityexist.com. Also, we're really close to getting a new camera, so please go to the website and donate so we can get that as soon as possible. I'm Knox, and this is Patch. Take it easy.